Fellow Muslims of Reddit, what misconception or mostly unknown fact about Islam do you want to share? Explain? Yes, but nowhere near as many different sects. They also run a tighter ship. For example, anyone can start a church, name it whatever they want and teach whatever they want. For example, Westboro Baptist Church. It's not Baptist, but they can open up shop and say, do whatever. Non-denominational Christianity is a further mess where anyone can open a church and say anything. You can't do this in Islam. You can't just up and make up new sects for fun. Sects of Islam have real history behind them. The exception is Nation of Islam. That one is just an American hate group of African Americans. It's not real Islam. Their beliefs are not Islamic. They just like the themes associated with Islam to scare, spite white Christians. This is something that seems extremely important in current times. I studied world religions briefly, and one of the main things I learned was ISIS does what they do entirely because of Islam. So does the Taliban. When people accuse the religion itself of being the cause of terrorism, it's misguided. Some branches of Islam are bad, very bad. By definition they are terrorism and believe it's what God wants of them. Some branches are very good, with teachings of to each their own. Only God may judge and punish. When people say Islam is a peaceful religion, these are the branches they are talking about. Islam is a very decentralized religion. There is no pope-like figure in Mecca presiding over a global hierarchy of clergymen. Instead, many Muslim-majority countries have their own national councils, with varying degrees of influence and authority, that their residents look to for guidance on religious matters. Many Muslims also choose to follow local clerics or imams, or to rely on their own interpretation of the faith. That's partly why there is so much variety around the world in what Muslims believe and practice. Ex-Muslim, I'd want them to understand that just like Christians there are billions of Muslims with different levels of devotion, interpretations and practice depending on culture and personality. You can have, for example, lawyer woman from Ankara who wears hijab, doesn't drink, doesn't eat pork and prays 5 times a day. Culturally Muslim girl from Istanbul who drinks socially, no hijab, no pork, no praying. Most people I know are like this one. Not even the most casual Muslim eats pork. Hijabi girl from Indonesia, no drinking, no pork, no daily prayer. Devout man from Iran who won't shake hands with women but doesn't pressure or mistreat his daughters. Devout woman from Syria who does pressure and mistreat her daughters. And so on and so forth. Just like there are a bazillion Christian types, so it is with Muslims. So out of curiosity, why is pork the biggest taboo? Most common tenet even casual Muslims maintain. I have seen this pattern a lot, known a fair number of people who are culturally from a Muslim background and they drink, don't pray and are cool with images of people, etc., but bacon is still super not okay. Is there a reason this held on to more than other beliefs, traditions? Not eating pork is a very strict requirement for Muslims, right? What happens if a Muslim eats pork? I'm asking because I have a coworker who is a Muslim, who suddenly went like this. What's up with us not eating pork? Does it taste bad? Then why are you guys eating it? Took a pork cutlet from my lunch tray and sniffs it. This smells good though. Chomp and tastes good too. And then he proceeds to finish his meal. I expressed my concern for him eating pork but he said he doesn't care. Edit. Thanks guys for clarifying that abstaining from pork is more of a cultural thing rather than something religious, at least in the case of Islam. A few years ago I was getting into my car downtown. I see 2 girls, one wearing a hijab but holding a cigarette, walking down the sidewalk in the way only tipsy people do. I hear the Muslim girl say to her friend, I am way too drunk to be an Arab right now. And that's still one of my favorite overheard things ever. I've actually been thinking about this for a while. Your comment made me think I needed to write it down. This is going to be a perspective of an American minority who has also lived in Europe, India, Africa and knows quite a few Muslim Americans. While the diversity you mention exists, I think the reason Muslims seem very extreme is that there are very few casual Muslims, At least in the US, most people from Muslim backgrounds I know are either totally not religious or are completely into Islam and do everything that seems hardcore. I think there are a few things that are unique to religious Muslims versus other religious people in aggregate in the United States. The average person with a Muslim background is more religious than the average person with a background. Most Muslims in the United States usually don't have to go too far into the family tree to find hardliner cousins and uncles. Hardcore Muslim is way more hardcore than a hardcore Christian, hardcore Jew, hardcore Hindu, by virtue of Islam being more demanding in day-to-day activities than other religions, prayer rituals, gender segregations, dietary restrictions, etc. Heavily religious Muslim men and women are more recognizable visually because of the head coverings and skull caps. Another reasons for Muslims seeming extreme on average is that of the major religions in the world, Islam is the only one whose dark side is currently accepted by state-level actors. I'm pretty sure I can find extreme Christian, Jewish, Hindu, Buddhist pockets in the world where they live like the Handmaid's Tale. But Islam's dark side is actually accepted and celebrated at the state level in a bunch of countries in the Middle East. The equivalent Christian nation would be something out of the 1700s, 1800s. I met a Muslim man who worked at my local gas station. He shared with me, after I shared my grieving about losing my dog recently, that he really wanted a dog, but his Muslim wife would never allow it in the house. He felt that not allowing a dog in the house would be cruel and just gave up on it. He mentioned how Muhammad was kind to dogs and gave them water. I understand it can be a religious issue, but I felt bad for him. He had grown up around dogs in his home country, Yemen. I think we are all human. We all experience things similarly, and we all believe different things and choose to live in the way we see fit. Actually, during times of war, it was said that men would marry, or really just take women into their homes to protect them. It wasn't to actually marry and sleep with them, rather provide a safe haven for them until their husbands return, or if they chose to move on and marry another man because their husbands may have died. Any man who in this day and age marries more than one woman and uses religion as a reason is a pathetic piece of shit. It should never be allowed. These days, they marry just to sleep with them. It's beyond ridiculous. The word Islam means submission in Arabic, and Muslim, Muslim, is the one who submits. The root of the word is connected to the word salam, which means peace in Arabic. Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. When the phrase religion of peace is used, it's talking about inner peace of the human spirit when you submit to God. It's not talking about having physical peace on earth. Evil and war will always exist no matter what religion you are. Also, Islam isn't just Arab. This is the biggest misconception. This is why I feel like calling Islamophobic racist feels weird, because Islam isn't a race. It's multiple races having the same belief. It's like calling Americans, Australians, Canadians, British people are the same because they are all Christian countries, in a way. We have different cultures within ourselves. Indeed, the point is though, in theory, everyone can be a Muslim around you, but because of 9/11 it is now a common misconception that a Muslim must be an Arab with a beard, preferably in the clothing of a sheikh. Muslims in my country are still picked out because they look Muslim, so even though it doesn't have to do with race, people assume it has a race. Islamophobia gets attached to racism because overwhelmingly the people practicing Islam are non-white. When a racist white person attacks or insults a Muslim, they are also likely to identify them by their race and attack that aspect of their existence. It's not that white people think that Muslims are a race. It's that they know that odds are if the person they are dealing with is a Muslim, they are some non-white person, and for racists that's really all that's needed to hate someone. There are nearly 2 billion Muslims in this world from every culture imaginable, literally from Morocco to Malaysia. There is no single Muslim culture, no more than there is a single Christian culture. Zimbabwe and Iceland are both Christian countries, but nobody lumps them in the same culture. Why do Muslims automatically all have the same culture? Honestly, for the US I think most Americans' only view of Muslims is from terrorist attacks and what we hear about the Taliban and ISIS. I know there are some areas of the US that have large Muslim populations, but many Americans have no other example of what Muslims are like. It's just plain ignorance. The media obviously plays a huge part in this. Every Muslim guy has multiple wives. I live in Bangladesh. It's rare to see a guy having multiple wives even though it's a Muslim country. I've never actually known any guy having multiple wives until a few years ago I went to Singapore with my family. We got on a taxi. The taxi driver was very curious and asked a lot of questions like what places have you visited or what foods have you eaten. Anyway, one question he asked to my dad was how many wives do you have? My dad answered one. Then that guy talked about how he used to work for a Muslim guy who had 7 wives and his son having 3. That was actually the first time me and my 2 sisters actually heard about this. We heard about Saudi princes having multiple wives but never thought about this being real. Also sorry for bad English. I remember seeing something related to this in an old movie I can't remember the name of, 50s or 60s time. A plane had crashed and the survivors were walking through the desert trying to find help, and an American man, A.M., was talking to a Muslim man, A.M., so I heard you guys are allowed to have 4 wives. Why do you only have 1? Are you married? A.M., yes, I am. Would you want more than 1? A.M., nods in understanding. I will share my own. Muslims must believe that God sent down the scrolls of David, the Torah, the Bible and the Quran. However, Muslims are to only follow the Quran and teachings of Muhammad because the other books were tainted, changed over time, etc. There is no original sin in Islam. Everyone is accountable for their own actions. Women are not considered evil or made to suffer because of Eve. The devil is a jinn, not an angel. It is forbidden to harm women, children, or non-combatants of war. The word Allah means a god, meaning it is specifically talking about the creator of all things. The Arabic word for just God is Allah. Arabic-speaking Christians and Jews use the word Allah. Muslims believe Jesus will return and kill the Antichrist. He will also break the cross, a symbolic way of saying you are supposed to worship God, not me. He will then live out the rest of his life, get married, have children, etc. Muhammad's first wife was Khadijah, a widow who was older than him. He was married only to her for 25 years until she died. Helpful link http://www.islamicpamphlets.com/. There is such a distorted view of Muslims in the West because of terrorism, but they are fundamentally the same as everyone else. It's like judging all black or white people for the actions of gangs or white supremacists. In the dealings I've had with Muslims, they've been some of the nicest people I've interacted with, the kind of people I'd have a beer with if they drank beer, so I guess the kind of people I'd have tea with. I read once that about 20% of the world's Muslims live in the Middle East, which is about the same percentage of Christians who live in Africa, but for some reason people strongly associate Middle East with Islam in a way they don't do with Africa and Christianity. People even do this in Australia despite Indonesia being right there. Edit. Guys, I do understand why the perception is the way that it is. I'm not completely stupid. I just thought it was an interesting comparison. Islam does not tolerate terrorism, nor does it promise any rewards. Example, 7 virgins in heaven for suicide bombers. Suicide is a highly frowned upon act to do in Islam. Hijab or covering of the face is an act of worship and not controlling of the person's wife. The 4 wives rule is only applicable under conditions where the first wife approves due to factors like being unable to conceive, etc. For the wife to stay at home and look after the family while the husband works is an act of culture, not religion. A woman is allowed to work if she wants to. Best example is the Prophet Muhammad's first wife was a wealthy businesswoman long before she got married to him, and keep all the money she earns to herself. It is up to her to share the money with her husband if she wants to, whereas a man has to share at least 15%. Unsure of this percentage, of his earnings by monthly allowance for her own spending. Islam advocates equal rights to women and is one of the first theologians in the world to allow a woman to consent to being married and freely supports the divorce of the marriage should she wish it. I have no dog in the fight, but I am very curious when Muslims say there is no God but Allah. Does that in any way reference the Christians' take on the divinity of Christ? I understand that Muslims revere Jesus Christ as a prophet but do not attribute any divinity to him, nor do they consider him the Son of God as Christians do. Also, I really appreciate you for offering yourself up to answer a question. Peace. My apologies if this is too loaded a question, but I have always been curious as to how most Muslims interpret jihad. I assume that the violent associations are a distortion, so I have always wondered what jihad actually is, if that makes sense, or how it's generally viewed. You don't have to answer this, but that's what I have always wanted to know. ETA. Thanks to all who answered. Till. Cool. I had a few. The orange-dyed beards. That means a man has recently been on the Hajj, right? I used to see them from time to time in the city, but I never had time or felt right to ask. I used to work in a store that sold decorations, among other things. Whenever I rang someone up buy-Eid merch, for some reason that's just what the store referred to it as, I had to look up Eid al-Fitr/Ramadan/Eid al-Adha myself. I was always tempted to greet them with Assalamu alaikum, but always chickened out because I wasn't sure I was using it right. Do Muslims have to follow every single word of Quran, or is there some flexibility that allows some things that would be considered haram or would conflict with Quran or Sharia? For example, allowing women to work or to lead the prayer in the mosque, allowing dogs to live inside the house, etc. Is it even allowed to openly and publicly contest or criticize some parts of the religious texts? Also, is it really bad to not pray every single day? Is it really necessary to pray 5 times a day? And is music really considered haram? Non-Muslim, Ed. White 32 years /O American male, non-religious /agnostic /spiritual, chiming in. I learned last year that the whole 72 virgins thing is not in the Quran. Ed. For those asking, it was the butt of a lot of petulant, racist jokes in middle school. In the years following 9/11, skeptical Robin Williams actually had a pretty clever joke about it in some 2002 stand-up, but it was, at the end of the day, misinformed. It comes from some extra Islamic text that I don't remember much about, save for it was mentioned in the introduction to a newly translated version of the Quran, which detailed its history with regards to faulty English translations and Western depictions of Islam. The Wikipedia article for Islamic terrorism provides an estimation that up to 30,000 murders are caused by acts of Islamist terrorism per year. The majority of the victims are themselves Muslims. https://n.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/Islamic_terrorism. No other world religion inspires mass murder of this magnitude, at least not in the current modern era. How can you explain that Islam is a religion of peace, as I have heard it explained many times by colleagues and friends, when we can observe these acts of terrorism by individuals who identify themselves as Muslims and are inspired to perform these acts of terrorism by Islam? They may be explained as being misguided, or ignorant, or misled fanatics, but I don't see any other major religion giving rise to so much extremism. According to Wikipedia, there are approximately 1.9 billion practitioners of Islam in the world, second to only Christians. If each murder due to Islamic extremism is from a distinct actor, that is, no terror attack claims more than one life, something we know is demonstrably false, and frequently, significantly so, that means there is one murderer for every 63,566 Muslims, or approximately 0.00157% of the religion. I would not advise characterizing a group of millions, let alone billions, by the actions of 0.002% at the expense of the other 99.998%. And again, we know the number would be significantly lower, as terror attacks frequently result in multiple fatalities.